Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, author of Visualizing Happiness in Every Area of Your Life and host of this podcast, Incredible Life Creator. And today I have with me Dina Cataldo. Hey, Dina.
Hello, how are you today?
I am great. You look lovely. Love to have you here.
Thank you. You do too. And thanks
Yes.
for having me.
Yes. And just so that people know you, I'm going to read your little short bio. So, Dina Cataldo helps driven lawyers who want to perform at their highest levels and have less stress. After 15 plus years as a criminal prosecutor, 6 years coaching lawyers take control of their lives, and beating cancer 4 times, 3 times breast cancer, 1 time skin cancer, Dina has stories, experiences, and techniques that can help calm overwhelm, build business, and get organized in their practice to no matter what their practice area. Well, I want to hear about all that. So tell us your story, Dina.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. I really feel like my life started when I had my first diagnosis of breast cancer. I really think that for so long I was living this driven life that had only one direction, which was go. It was just go. It almost felt frenetic. And it was something that I had learned over time to be that way. You achiever in school, high achieving in college and law school. And then, of course, when you get into the real world, the professional world, there's also this driven to prove yourself to your bosses, driven to prove yourself to the people around you, all of those things. And so my whole life had really been about how do I show other people that I deserve to be here, that I deserve the accolades, that I deserve whatever financial compensation I'm getting, that kind of thing. But when I was a trial attorney at 29 years old, I was about 3 years into my practice, I was diagnosed with breast cancer for the first time. And that was a big eye opener for me because when I was in chemotherapy, it felt like a vacation. And I couldn't understand why I felt so relaxed. I felt so good. I was like, wow, why does chemotherapy feel so good? Like, this shouldn't be happening. And so that really got me started down this path of figuring out, okay, what is the magic? How do I recapture that amazingness that was happening during chemotherapy during my day-to-day life as a lawyer? So that's how I kind of look at where my life started.
Got it. So when you had this first diagnosis, were you already married or were
No, I so
kind
I
of
I've never been married. I don't have kids. My whole life, I never wanted children. It's not that I didn't like them. It's just I never felt like that was something that I was called to do. I always felt called to do something in my life. I just didn't know what it was. So when I was, diagnosed, my parents, they wanted to come up and support me. And I said, please, no, do not come because I'm going to feel the need to take care of you. Like,
Mhm.
I'm going to want you to feel comfortable and I need to take care of me. So I was good in that respect. But there were so many lessons that came from that initial diagnosis, things like asking for help. Like, I never asked for help before that. I was basically taught growing up, don't ask for help, be independent. You need to take care of yourself, which is fine to a certain extent. But I took it to the extreme. You would even see that reflected maybe in my work where I didn't want to ask for help because I looked at that as a personal failing asking for help. So when I was diagnosed, I needed help driving to the hospital. I needed help driving to chemotherapy appointments. I needed help figuring things out. Like, I needed to go to do something, and I was called to go to yoga. And so that was something that I was like, okay, so I need help with that. I need somebody to like teach me how to do this. And so there were things I needed help with that I had never become accustomed to asking for before. And as a result, I started opening myself up to new relationships because now I'm reaching out to people and people like it when you reach out and ask for help. Like, they feel needed, right? We all like to feel needed. So that was something that helped me go in that direction and open things up. It also allowed me to do things that I knew logically were healthy, but I wasn't doing, like going to yoga. And when I went to yoga, I started learning things like, oh, when you feel fear, that's something there for you to look at. And so that actually got me thinking because every so often I'd write in my journal and I'd see in my bucket list, I'd do a periodic bucket list. And one of those items was start a business. And so one day I was flipping through my journal and I looked back and I said, wow, I'm not starting this business. It's written in all these bucket lists. Why am I not doing it? And I said, oh, I'm scared. And so why am I scared? Oh, because I'm afraid I'm going to fail. I'm afraid that I'm going to look bad. I'm afraid that people aren't going to understand. And all of these fears came up. And of course, because I went to yoga, I learned, oh, wait a minute, that's something to look at. That's where my growth is. And so then I started down that path and I experimented with different businesses. And then eventually, I mean, what is it, 18 years later, I am where I am now so that I could do these things. Well, gosh, 14 years, 15 years later, I can do these things, but all because I was diagnosed with breast cancer, it really allowed me to start thinking differently about my life and put me in a path where I could say, wait a minute, I need to make space in my life for that thing that's calling to me that I'm ignoring completely.
Yeah, and that's actually the story of so many people. They have this thing and they say someday, but someday never comes.
Yeah. Yeah. And we push it aside because we think it's not logical, it's not reasonable. Because I was making good money as a DA, I was doing just fine, and because this is how we're raised, our society tells us to be very practical. You want to just you be very conservative with your money, you want to be reasonable with it, you don't want to do things that are going to risk money, those kinds of things. At least that's how I was raised. And so when I looked at my aspirations to start a business and I was looking at the investments that it took to
Mhm.
invest in myself, to invest in infrastructure. Even online businesses have infrastructure. We've got to, put things in place so that we can operate them.
Mhm.
It scared me because my brain was saying, this isn't logical. You shouldn't do this. You have a good job. Why are you doing this? Why are you putting yourself at risk? Wait a minute. Like it wanted to put the brakes on it over and over again. But I had to keep honoring that part of myself that said, but wait a minute, there's this thing that I'm called to do. Like if I say no to this, I'm going to regret it. And so I'm going to invest even though it's scary and I feel bad and it feels horrible, but I know this is the right thing. And I'm so glad I did because that voice was trying to protect me in the only way it knew how, but it wasn't helping me create and design the life that I truly knew that I wanted and that I have now.
Yeah. So obviously you were very driven to become a lawyer. So when did you know you wanted to become a lawyer and what usually some people have there's a mission, there's something that they want to do or help somebody or do something. What was your why?
So I decided I wanted to be a lawyer when I was studying abroad in Egypt. And when I was in Egypt, 9/11 had just happened. And I had been in the country for maybe a week when it happened. And so it, all that was on the news 24/7 was, the Twin Towers, all of the things that we saw. And I had a very different perspective of it because I was living in the Middle East. So I was getting so much information around like, here's all the history behind, the Middle East and the relationships with the US. And I was really getting interested in foreign policy based upon, watching the news and the people I was talking to. And I thought, wow, this is so fascinating. And there was one person I would see most often that I looked up to at the time, which was Hillary Clinton. And she was a lawyer and she was advising on foreign policy. And so my brain at the time was saying, well, one way to influence foreign policy would be to become a lawyer and get involved in those circles. I discovered much later that none of that really matters. Like the political system, I don't even get involved in it now. But at the time, that was an area of my life that I was heavily involved with, thinking about. And I thought that was an area where I could make an impact. And so that's really what influenced me to go to law school at first. I didn't become a prosecutor with the idea that I would be a prosecutor for 15 plus years. I went into the DA's office like a lot of attorneys do with a 5-year plan, right? It's like, okay, I'm going to do this, I'm going to get experience, and then I'm going to move on to my next thing. But when you start a pattern in your life, oftentimes you get inertia, right? You just begin down this path and then it becomes easy. I mean, you're getting paid every 2 weeks, you know what you're doing, people look up to you, you start to get like people your ego gets involved, right? Because you have a title and people treat you differently when you have a title. So all of that really contributed to the inertia of it. And then, of course, there's life, right? You love insurance. I love having insurance. It's absolutely fabulous. It pays for medical bills, right? All of these different things that create security.
Mhm.
I'm putting that in quotes because we actually are the ones who create security. But at the time, my brain said, oh, yeah, this job is creating the security for me. And so I just kind of gave myself to that and kind of went down this path. And when I was initially diagnosed with breast cancer, it gave me that initial, hey, look at this kind of thing. But I was still in those patterns of overworking. Not now, it wasn't just in the legal profession because I just didn't know how to get out of the overworking in the legal profession. But now I started a business running parallel to that. And I was overworking in my business. So I had these two parallel lives, both of which I was killing myself trying to figure out, how do I run these things? How do I build a business on top of this career? And then not knowing that the reason I'm having such a hard time is because of the habits I've gotten into over my lifetime up to that point and how they were working against me. All of the habits that had helped me in high school and college and law school, they were working against me now. And I needed to turn everything around. And it kind of felt like turning a big ship around, trying to do that. And so it was just, I just chipped away at it a little at a time over time. And eventually I got to a place where I was like, okay, everything feels so much easier now. I'm not saying life's perfect and that everything is just rainbows and daisies all the time, but it becomes so much easier when you are able to unlearn those old habits and start to introduce your brain to a new way of thinking, a new way of being in your life so that you can achieve the life that you want and intentionally design the life that you want.
Beautiful. So, I know you said you kind of change things little by little, but what are some of the things that even to this day you still practice? Some people have a morning practice or something they do every day. Do you have some of those things?
Well, I'll tell you the very first thing that I changed, and it gave me confidence too, because I didn't have attachment to the outcome. I wasn't angry with myself when things didn't go the way that I wanted them to, which had been my habit up to that point. So I noticed that when I woke up in the morning, I would hit snooze like a dozen times. I would feel horrible. I would feel panicked and rushed. I would take a quick shower. I would get ready for the office. I'd jump in the car. I'd zoom to the office. I had road rage, right? Because I'm like in a hurry, right? You get to the office and then you boom, you basically the day has smacked you in the face and now you're just off and running. And there was one morning I was like, I hate this. I absolutely hate this. And I just felt like this horrible feeling like this feels horrible. I don't want to feel this anymore. And for whatever reason, I said, well, why don't I change it? And I just started chipping away at it. And I said, okay, well, what would I do if I wanted to change it? What would my morning look like? And I said, well, I'd have time to sip my coffee. I'd be able to just sit and relax for a little bit. I'd be able to get ready and I'd be calm. And I just guessed. And I said, well, how long do you think that'll take you? Well, I guess I need like maybe an hour, and so then I was like, okay, we set the alarm an hour earlier. And then I had the same habit hitting the alarm and then I'd get to the next chip, which was, okay, well, I didn't wake up early. Why do I think I didn't wake up early? Well, you have your alarm in your bedroom and you're tempted to hit the snooze alarm when you do that. So let's put the alarm in the kitchen. It was just that process of me chipping away at and problem solving for my morning routine. that
Mhm.
it felt so empowering too. Like even talking about it, it's like that was the moment where I was like, wait a minute, I actually have power over my life. Like if I don't, and I didn't think this way in terms of in the moment, but when I look back at it, I
Mhm.
can see exactly why I was able to do it. I wasn't beating myself up, telling myself I'd never be able to do anything different. And like, oh my gosh, like I hit my snooze alarm again. And that means I'm never going to be able to do this. I might as well give up. It's like, no, let's just problem solve. Every time there's a problem, let's just problem solve it. Oh, I'm really tired this morning. Well, when did I go to bed last night? Oh, that makes sense. I went to bed really late. So I went to bed a little earlier. I started doing that. And it was just this act of small problem solving over the course of months. Like this wasn't like a 1 week type of thing. It was just, oh, another problem, let's solve it. Another problem, let's solve it. And that gave me so much confidence because when I started seeing that I could create a morning where I felt good, it allowed me to see, oh, wait a minute, like I could actually change other things too. So then I started changing other things. I was like, I don't like how I feel when I drink alcohol. And maybe is that something I want to change? Or like these different kinds of things in my life, I was able to shift. And I started noticing, oh, wait, when I drink alcohol, it takes like a whole day away from me and then I can't work on my business. And so then I started working on that aspect of my life. And then when I got that day back to work on my business, it was like, wow, look, I can make some progress. So it was incremental. And it also required me to, instead of beating myself up, to just problem solve and to be kind to myself and just do the things little by little so I could open up space and learn what I needed to learn to create that life.
Yeah, and when you said open up space, I even just felt that. It's not just in your mind, it's in your physical space. It's like expanding all
Yes.
your energy
Yes.
way out there. And that does feel better when you're expanded out like that.
Yes. I mean, we tend to think, and this is, working with lawyers, when I'm working with them one on one, I hear this all the time. They think they need to pack their day full back to back to back to back things. I was the same way. And that is the only way to be productive. But if you notice yourself doing that, if you're listening to this and you're noticing yourself doing that, you got to ask yourself why. Like, why do you feel the need to do that? What exactly are you getting from that? Like, why do we have this whole drive to be productive with every moment of our day? When I look back at it, I see society has driven us to believe that we need to do that. But what happens is it disconnects us from who we are as humans. And instead, it favors this idea that we're supposed to be robots, that we are supposed to be moment by moment doing something productive, never sitting down, feeling guilty if we're not taking action on something. Somehow we're missing out on something in our life if we're not productive. The opposite is true. We're actually missing out on life when we're not creating space.
Yeah. So true. So I'm asking this from the viewpoint of just seeing attorneys on TV. So
Mhm.
but when
Fair.
I think of a young, in the first 10 years of their practice attorney, you see them wanting to make partner, wanting to move up in the firm, and then working these ungodly hours, sometimes 60, 80 hours. So
Yeah.
when you have someone that comes to you and they're doing this, how is it that you talk them through the fact that actually they can be more productive with not so many hours? Because they
Yeah.
probably feel stuck.
Oh, yeah. I mean, it's so counterintuitive, right? Because our brain thinks if we work harder, then we won't be behind and that we will have more time. And we just need to keep working harder in order to finally reach that magical day when we don't have work. And that's simply not how it works. And if you're doing that, you notice that that's not how it works, right? There's always more work.
Mhm.
So when someone like that comes to me, we don't start with like, okay, let's manage your time. We start with managing their mind because one of the things that they're not doing is pausing to recognize the thoughts in their head. So we have about 60,000 thoughts in our head popping in there every single day, and most of them are the same, and most of them are not very nice to us, right? They're very judgmental of what we're doing, what we're not doing. and how mean we are to ourselves really determines what we're capable of. I always tell people, like, talk to yourself like you want to succeed.
Mhm.
And when you talk to yourself like you're being bad, you're not doing enough, I'm not good enough, I should be working harder, that all depletes your energy. Like I think of us as like batteries. If you think of us as a battery, let's say we start our day on full. And so many of us don't, right? We're already like a little bit behind in the energy game because maybe we didn't sleep or things like that. But let's say you start a battery full in the morning.
Mhm.
Well, every decision you make brings down the battery a little bit of the energy gets drained. Every time you beat yourself up, though, it's the same thing. A little bit more of the energy gets drained. Every time you are disappointed in yourself, or you feel shame, or you feel guilty, a little bit more of the energy drains. And so when we start working just on how they talk to themselves, their battery starts to fill up. They start to have more energy. And when I introduced them to this concept of, okay, we'll do things for you in the week. Like first of all, that blows their mind, but they hear me talking about it enough on my podcast that I think they're like, okay, maybe there's something to this, right? This is what I had to do too. Is I had to start giving me something so I could recharge my battery throughout the week.
Mhm.
And when I started doing that, I started recognizing, oh, wait, like I actually have more energy. I have more focus. I'm able to get more things done. I'm able to problem solve better when I take time to do yoga for myself, when I take time to just sit and drink my coffee. I'm a better person. Oh, people actually like to be around me because I'm nicer, right? Those kinds of things. I feel nicer. So when I do that with my clients who are like, I have one client I'm thinking of right now. He's in Big Law. He works in Manhattan and he's working those hours, right? And he has a family. And when he started making time for himself and his family, like he started, really intentionally saying, no, I am going to stop working at this time. I'm going to spend time with my wife. I'm going to spend time with my kids. His quality of life, it exponentially improved, and that was even before he started really using a calendar. Like it has nothing to do with a calendar or using that more effectively. It has to do with using your mindset more effectively.
Mhm.
Because when you start being kinder to yourself and that starts being reflected in your actions, you start to feel better. Your stress levels reduce. You're just a happier person.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about time management. If we can actually, I mean, everybody's got the same amount of time. I'm
Mhm.
not sure if that's even the right word, but how do we order our day so that we have lifestyle, we have productive work, and we have that joy inside?
So I'll start with, and oftentimes I have said like we all have the same amount of time in the day. But the truth is that we don't all have the same amount of time in the day. We all manage it differently, right? Like we might not have to manage things. Like somebody who has 10 kids might have to manage time differently, right? Like they have different priorities. If we look at somebody like an Oprah, they have 100 assistants helping them in all of her businesses and all of her different things that she does day to day. She has that. And then she's responsible for other things, right? So she is able to do things that maybe some people might not be able to. But where I want to bring this into like the real world is, let's say you're a lawyer or you work in an office or you are working for somebody else or yourself and you have an assistant, let's say, right? There's different tools we have throughout our day in order to make that time, like stretch the time, which is what really successful people tend to do, right? They stretch the time because they find ways to use levers. So one lever might be an assistant, right? How effectively are you using that assistant? Most of the lawyers I talk to do not effectively use their assistant. They do not delegate because their brain tells them it's going to be faster if I just do it myself. No, it won't. It might in this moment, but you are stealing from yourself so much time in the future by not training your assistant, by not investing that time up front and saying, here's a standard operating procedure. This is what I need you to do. And
Mhm.
then walking them through that training. So that's something that needs to get done. Even Oprah had to do that at first, right? She had to train somebody, right? So when we're thinking about levers, what are your levers, right? So for me, my levers are my calendar because that organizes my mind. If I don't use my calendar, my mind's not organized around what needs to get done. What are my priorities? That's a big lever for me. Another lever is my assistant. And that, you do have to account for they're going to have questions, right? That's the nature of having an assistant. But then the overall benefit of having an assistant is that they can take like 10, 15, 20, 40 hours of work off your plate in a
Mhm.
week, depending on how you're using them. And they will be able to help you. What are your other levers? Maybe it's asking for help from a spouse. I had one client who she was like, I just don't know what to do at night. Like, I got to give my baby a bath. I want to start this business. And I'm like, I'm so tired though. And I said, well, what's your husband doing? It's like, oh, he's like usually doing something. I don't know exactly. Have you ever asked him for help? And she said, I never asked him for help. He said, do you think he'd help you? He's like, yeah, I think he would. And sure enough, he did. Right. So sometimes we just don't ask for help, going back to the point where my weakness was that I learned about, which is asking for help and asking for assistance anywhere. And then when people ask you if you need help, accepting it, that's another lever, right? Because so often someone will ask us, hey, do you need some help with that? And we say, no, I got it. I have started saying yes. I think the only time I don't say yes is when I'm at the grocery store and they say, hey, you want us to take you out to the car? I'm like, no, I'm cool.
Mhm.
But in every other situation, I'm saying, oh, yeah, please open the door. Thank you so much. Or that, like, yeah, please, if you wouldn't mind carrying that, that would be fabulous. Thank you. The more I do that, the more I ask for things, the more I realize, oh, wait, there's always help. Even like when I get an email from somebody and maybe they don't really know how to do something, I'll just say, hey, can you do XYZ to complete that task? And then they'll complete it. It's like, oh, it doesn't all fall on me. And I think so much of the pressures we put on ourselves is believing that, oh, it's all up to me. Like I have all this responsibility when really help is all around us. It's just a matter of finding those levers to
Mhm.
start.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I wanted to change gears a little bit. I mean, something I read in your bio, beating cancer 4 times, and just kind of wanted to get a peek into, you kind of talked about what happened the first time, but then when it came again and again and again,
Yeah, so fascinating,
you
right?
know,
So
what was your mindset? How were you, how did the first time prepare you for the second time? What?
so the first time I had it, I was very emotional about it because everybody were taught, oh my God, cancer is like a death sentence, all of these things. And then also, I wasn't expecting it because I had had this area and, I had a lump in my breast and I had it checked multiple times. And I had watched it and it was nothing. They just said, oh no, it's just water. It's okay. There's nothing there. And so finally, I had a biopsy. They said it was nothing. And I was like, I don't know. It just feels unattractive. Like it was vanity that really had me remove this lump. So I didn't even expect it to be anything. Everybody told me it was nothing. And so when they removed it, they told me it was cancer. And at that point, it was stage 3 cancer. It's considered stage 3. So when you take that out and somebody says, "Oh, wait a minute, it's cancer," you're kind of shell shocked at first. You're like, "Wait a minute, I have been doing everything I'm supposed to be doing. I have been watching it. What do you want from me?" So so I was kind of shocked. And the fact that I was going to need to go through chemo and radiation, I never identified myself as that type of person. I will also share with you that there were 2 other people in my class at the DA's office that were also diagnosed with cancer, and they both died. And so when I look at that situation, I can't help but look at it and say, this situation, this being in this environment is toxic. There's something about law school. Like everything about it led me to believe that deep down. But at the time, I didn't really know what to do with that. I just knew I had cancer and I needed to figure this out. So I was very emotional. I didn't know anybody who had had cancer, of breast cancer specifically. So I went online, tried to find anybody who had ever had it, and tried to, like, Kylie Minogue, I think at the time had had it, and maybe Christina Applegate. And those were the people back then, right? And then I was just trying to find someone to relate to. And then the second time that I had been diagnosed, I was 42. So it was just a couple years ago. I don't even count the skin cancer, honestly. It's just like I had that on my arm and they removed it, and I just take care of myself with sunscreen when I need it. And I don't even really think much of that one. But when I started adding it all together, it's kind of an interesting puzzle that I put together, which I'll lead to in a second. So then when I was 42, I was diagnosed with breast cancer again, but what had happened is the cancer that I had had in my left breast had actually migrated into my right lung. So what's really fascinating about that, and what medical professionals, they can't answer all the questions, right? Medical professionals do not know all the answers. And I think when I was 29, I really thought that they did have all the answers
Mhm.
and that they were going to be able to fix me, whatever that meant. And that's why I went through chemo and radiation. I don't think I would have ever done that again, knowing what I know now after my third bout of breast cancer, which I'll share in a second. But when I found out that I had cancer in my right lung, it was really interesting to me because they had taken a lymph node out of my left side, and there was no cancer particles found inside of that, no molecules inside of that, which is supposed to tell you that, oh, it's fine. It hasn't migrated to the rest of your body. Oh, chemo's supposed to protect you. We'll give you chemo at 29, 30 years old, and that's supposed to protect you for the rest of your life. Radiation, oh, that'll protect you. No, like it absolutely did not. So I learned that, and then had surgery in my right lung because I wanted to make sure that I had that removed. That was, that was just at the time it made sense. Let's do this. I still think it made sense because it was something that needed to be removed from my body. But then I had my third bout of breast cancer, which happened earlier this year, and it was in my left breast again. And just so that people listening know, like, I'm very holistic now, but I'm also very spiritual. And so the left side of our bodies where our femininity lives, right? So all our feminine energies on our left side, all our masculine energies on our right side, and our job in life is really to balance the two. But throughout my life, I've been heavily in the masculine side, the doing side, taking action side. I've
Mhm.
been less balanced in the feminine side, which is the more passive side, which is more receiving, right? So we as, females, we tend to, especially if we're driven, weigh heavily in the masculine, and then we don't weigh into the feminine. And the reason that came up for me is because the way the doctor told me this time that I had cancer in my breast again on the left side was like, I don't know what's wrong with that side or what's going on. And like in that moment when she said that, my brain said, "Oh, I know what it is. I still haven't learned completely my lesson, which is to begin to balance more. Like I've got to balance myself even more. Like this is good that I have it." And it was just these small, and this was the good news that I had, was it was these small calcifications in my left breast, which were cancerous, but they were not migrating. They weren't spreading. They weren't yet like going into other cells. But my doctor wanted me to get a full mastectomy. And I was gonna go with it, and I said, "Wait, I gotta talk to this gal of mine, and she's gonna know who I need to talk to." And so I talked to Dr. Katie Deming. I don't know if you're familiar with her, but she was a former oncologist who now treats cancer holistically, and I worked with her on it. And I said, and she actually said this to me, and I was like, "This makes sense to me." She said, "This is such a great gift because it's so tiny." Like, it's a small thing, right? In comparison to what the other things were anyway. So it's just kind of like a little reminder, like, hey, like there's just a little bit more work to be done here. Like, it's just a little bit more work. And so even though over the years, even since, I was 42, I've been improving all these different areas in my life, whether it's health, whether it's my spiritual practices, all of these things, This is just like this little reminder, like, hey, there's still a little more here to do. So I worked with her. I did a 14-day fast. I have converted to completely organic pasture raised foods. I have cut out sugar. I have cut out most carbs, right? I have really changed my entire system of living in a way that is much more in alignment with connecting with the food that I eat, like being respectful to the food that I eat, being more respectful to my body. And that cancer is totally gone. Like I went to the doctor I think it was about 6 weeks ago now, had a mammogram. The doctor was like shocked, was like, oh my God, like you have no calcifications in there. And I'm like, I was not shocked because I was like, I did the work.
Uh-huh.
I changed all of these things. I eat incredibly great food. I monitor, like how I am being with my food. I went through the 14-day fast and it was gone.
Mhm.
And I really credit that change as part of what I needed to do in order to balance my life even further. And cancer's just been kind of this gift to share with me, like, hey, there's a little bit more work to do. But if I knew now like, if I knew then back when I was 29, 30, what I knew now, I wouldn't have listened to what the doctor said. I would have said, okay, yeah, let's cut it out, but I'm not doing chemo. I'm not doing radiation. I'm going to go in this other route where I start to really be respectful to my body. I don't know if I would have been able to hear it because I was 29, 30 and I was still in that driven mode, but gosh, it sure would have been nice if I could have because that it really changed everything and it was just this it was amazing. So I will share that with you. It was just amazing to see what the body can do because the body truly was meant to heal itself if we use the right levers.
Well, the wonderful thing is there's probably a 29-year-old listening right now who's at the same place you were, who has more information than you did, and you
Mm,
just inspired her or him, because men can get breast cancer too.
yeah.
Um, you just inspired that person to open up their eyes and at least take a look at all the possibilities of healing.
Yeah. And I really hope so because it the relationship that we have been sold in this life is one of disconnection. It's one of being disconnected from our food sources. It's from being disconnected from ourselves. It's from being disconnected from people. I mean, even look in recent history, right? We've been separated from each other. And so in this particular lifetime, I think our work is to reconnect with everything. We've got to reconnect with ourselves. We've got to honor the animals that are our food sources if you choose to eat meat, right? Like we have to honor the relationships we have and, watch for the relationships that maybe are not so healthy and pull ourselves out of those. Like those are the kinds of things we as humans have abdicated responsibility for because we've been told that, hey, it's okay to eat crap. It's okay. This is normal to eat Cheez-Its. It's normal to eat Doritos. It's not real food. I
Mhm.
mean, I know we might be deviating a bit from the topics you might have wanted to talk about, but this is like essential to how I choose to live my life. And so these kinds of things I think they're just so important to recognize the disconnection so that we can begin reconnecting with what's really important in our lives.
No, I'm so glad we went there
Good.
because that's really important.
Yeah.
So, when you work with lawyers, like, how do they know that, hey, that's them, they need to come see you?
Usually they'll find me on my podcast, Be a Better Lawyer, and they'll hear stories. Like they'll hear, an anecdote or they'll hear a story that I've done. And usually the stories are around feeling overwhelmed because I think we all can relate to feeling overwhelmed. We can all relate to procrastinating. Like these kinds of things when they notice they're overwhelmed, procrastinating, they're stressed out, they maybe even feel burned out. That's the time to get help, like and that there is help because I think so many lawyers and other people too, believe that there's no way out, that there's no other choice, that the only option is to push through. And that's not the only option. I think people are awakening now to the idea of, wait a minute, there's something wrong here. Like, this is not how it should be. There's got to be another way. And so when they start awakening to that, whether they hear a podcast or maybe they, you know, find me online somewhere, at a talk or something like that, then they're like, oh, okay, I need to connect more. I need to know more. How do I do this? And that's really how they reach out.
Beautiful. So, in speaking of reaching out, if someone did want to connect with you, where do they find you and what services do you have available right now?
Yeah. So right now, if someone, this is what, end of 2024, September 2024 is when we're talking. You could find me on my podcast, Be a Better Lawyer. You can find me on Instagram at Dina.Cataldo, cat and Aldo like the shoe. You can also find me on LinkedIn. And I have one-on-one programs where I work, one-on-one individually with attorneys. I find that the people who are most attracted to that offering are people who want to accelerated process and progress, and they want to do it in a private area. Like, they don't necessarily want to share all of their most intimate fears and vulnerabilities in, a program. They want to have that one-on-one time with me and get that support. And then I also have an offering that will be coming out in January. I've already started my first round of it, called Timepiece for Lawyers. And so that's exclusively for lawyers. But it's something that really is designed to help them create a life that they love without feeling all of the stress, the anxiety, the overwhelm, just like we've been talking about here. But no matter what, I have a free offering. It's called the Busy Lawyer's Ultimate Time Management Guide. And even if you're not a lawyer, you can download it. You can go to dinacataldo.com/busy lawyer, and they can get some really great tips on how to manage their time, including a short video series that will walk them through it. Of
All right. Well, thank you. So, now I have a personal question for you.
course.
Gives you the most happiness and fulfillment at this point?
Yeah. What gives me the most happiness and fulfillment is my spiritual practice. I devote a lot more time to it now than I ever have before, and it allows me to feel more peace. And that my spiritual practice can be as simple as going for a walk, right? Going for a walk and paying attention to the birds singing and being thankful for the sun and, listening to my footsteps or the steps of my puppy, right? So it's like those kinds of things create that connection with the earth and with the environment. So that's one thing that I do that's anybody can do, right? Like, anybody could step out their door and really appreciate the hummingbirds. Why this was really what was great. The other day I was out. It's been really hot here in Sacramento where I'm living right now. And I saw this hummingbird on my walk. And somebody had set their sprinklers out, and this hummingbird was in the sprinkler, and he was just hovering up and down, taking a little bath in the sprinkler. And I was like, oh,
So sweet.
best thing ever. Right. So it's those kinds of things, like, to just pause and appreciate those things and like allow yourself to just like have joy at observing beautiful nature. Like, it's just everywhere for us.
Yeah, I love that.
Mm.
Thank you. And thank you so much for being on the podcast today and
Yeah.
sharing all your wisdom.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been a real joy for me to be here. And I hope that, somebody listened to this and took something away from it. And if they, feel compelled, like they want to reach out to me, they can also email me, Dina@dinacataldo.com.
All right. So I have one last question before we finish.
Okay.
What is your best advice on living an incredible, amazing life?
I think it would be to recognize that where you are right now is perfect. Like, everything, your mind might be telling you you're not far enough along, but appreciate where you are right now. And it might be hard, but find something. That was one of the biggest practices that allowed me to catapult myself from working as a lawyer and then finally leaving and working full time as a coach is having compassion for myself and where I was in that moment. And when I could really do a practice, like my practice I would do is before I'd go to bed, I'd require myself to write 10 things that I accomplished that day that I was proud of. And maybe it was just like I had a hard time thinking of one and it's like, well, I woke up even when I didn't want to wake up today. It could be that or, I didn't snap at the person that I usually snap at or, but to really just notice those things that you're proud of yourself and to appreciate in the moment what you're doing well is going to change your relationship with yourself. And when you do that on a consistent basis, you're going to notice big shifts in your life.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Dina.
Thank you.
We'll talk to you again soon.